Hey everyone, welcome back. It's Rick. Welcome to the Sound Horizons podcast, brought to you by Toontrack, where we talk to amazing people in the music industry about amazing music stuff. You know you love it. You know you do. But today, we're very excited, elated even, to have an amazing human being and phenomenal contributor to this world of music that we all love and enjoy. Please put your internet troll and warm welcome hands together for my friend and yours, Curt Bisquera, everyone. Let me hear it over the internet. I want to hear the applause. I hear it. Wow.
What's happening?
What's going on?
People of Earth.
Of the Earth and the internet. I'm adjusting my ear here. So, Curt Bisquera, first of all,
talk to me.
Thank you, because it's earlier where you are than where I am. You are on the sunny West Coast.
Sunny West Coast has a lovely, beautiful, going to be 83 degrees. I think it's 74 now.
Wow.
Clear skies with the exceptional chemtrails here and there. So but that's another podcast.
Do you want me to just give you the salt to keep rubbing in the wound? Or it's like,
no,
because we're here in the very cloudy, rainy, doesn't know what it wants to do yet suburbs of Chicago. So we couldn't have that nice of a weather yet. So we'll get there, maybe for a day or two. Yeah,
you'll get there.
But the most important question we all want to know, that I think will define the pace of the rest of the interview, is what's the best movie or television show you've seen recently and why?
Oh man, Netflix Warrior. Warriors,
really?
Warriors based on the writings of Bruce Lee.
Okay.
Late 1800s, the Chinese coming over to San Francisco, and they're basically slaves. They build the railroad coast to coast, and the character, loosely based on Bruce Lee, is a badass and comes in and just basically kicks everyone's butt and joins the Chinese gang, and it's all good. But it's a hell of a show. I mean,
is this incredible. So this is Newark. I haven't even heard of this show, and I was just on Netflix last night.
Yeah, it's called Warrior. It was on, I think it was on Hulu, but then it switched over to Netflix. But it is a hell of a show, and it's what's cool about it. It really kind of dives into the time frame of like the 1800s and what was really going on out here in the West Coast. It was the, it was the gold rush. Everyone was coming out here. They're building the railroad. The Irish are coming in and they were policing everyone. It's an incredible, historic, action-packed kung fu.
Oh, so
chop sake.
You had me at kung fu. I love it. So Warrior, everyone, you heard it here first or second.
Yes,
you've already been watching it.
Yes.
So I segue from that into this thing that, I mean, in your career, you've done 5 million versions of interviews, podcasts. You've talked about 7 million different things. And in trying to put this together, my goal is always to not come at anyone in our field with the same questions, the boilerplate questions they get asked. So let me just, for all of our fans watching, remind everyone. So your career as a session drummer really starts to take off at what I like to call like the third renaissance of session drummers in that late 80s, early 90s. We had our original renaissance with the Wrecking Crew. Then we had our second renaissance in that mid 70s with Steve Lucas, the guys that would become Toto and beyond. And then you're part of this generation of guys that, in my opinion, ultimately comes onto the scene at the height of session player utilization, and the industry is making more money than it's ever made, and records are huge, and it was this magic time we called the 90s.
Right.
And you play on these ridiculous records, and you're working with artists and composers, and you're doing, we'll get to some of that in a second, because I mean, I don't even know how you keep track of it, but you get to this point. I want to ask you, as someone now living in 2024, still doing sessions, adapting to the way things are done, when did you see the turning point for session drummers moving more in the direction where we're at with the industry and the music and records now? Is there a moment you can pinpoint where you're like, wait a minute, things are different now?
Oh man, I know it exactly like yesterday. It was the year 2000. Okay. So I started my recording career in 1990.
Okay.
Prior to 1990, I was doing a bunch of tours. My first tour was, of course, with Morris Day and the Time. Yes. So with him and a bunch of R&B acts, Shalimar, Pebbles, a lot of R&B stuff. Then I got my first like pop rock tour with Belinda Carlisle of the Go-Go's. And then right after I got off the road in 1990, Jeff Porcaro calls me and says, "Yo, man, I need you for a session." And this was 1990 when Jeff was about to embark on producing. And unfortunately, we didn't get a chance to hear his wonderful productions because he shortly, 2 years after 1990 passed away. But I remember he was the guy that took me under his wing, and overnight, literally like that, my career changed from, R&B funk touring guy to studio guy in 1990. And again, it changed overnight. I started getting calls, and my schedule was booked every week, every day. It seemed like all through the 90s. And then here comes the year 2000. And I'm playing with Elton John at Madison Square Garden. And right after that, I got called for a couple sessions. And I noticed during the 2000, like right at the mid of 2000, May, June, something like that, record labels and studios started closing. And
it's no
good.
Bueno.
Yeah, no bueno. And I remembered like it felt like being at the apex of the roller coaster, where you're right on top and it goes and then you're looking down at the track. I'm looking down at the track and there's no track down there.
Oh man.
And the roller coaster starts barreling down, and dude, every studio, it seemed like, started closing down one by one, two by two, labels folding and getting absorbed by the bigger labels. And then like by 2010, it seemed like the industry just completely got absorbed by its own, like it ate itself, And then there were just a few labels left, Universal and Sony. It seemed like those are the two biggies that were hanging and that were absorbing all the little indie labels and that kind of thing. And then it just from there became what it is now today, but it was even better then in 2010. But I remember, that through 1990 going forward to 2000, I made the switch from 2-inch tape to Pro Tools to DAWs. So that was an interesting time as well, which is a whole other conversation.
Well, and when you look back on it, I mean, I always joke poor drummers because they're always the first to go, and then they're the first to go because technology generally tends to affect the rhythm section first, right?
Right.
So in the 70s and 80s, you have synthesizers and drum machines, and then software. So as you see this change, there generally tend to be two types of players. There's the sky's falling, I got to get out. But then there's the guys like yourself that adapt to the technology that's coming through, that work with drum machines. I mean, you've been on records with Charlie Clouser, and you've worked in percussion and just going into the session to complement other things that were already done. And I wanted to see if you could talk to that mindset of, okay, I know I'm the session drummer, but when I show up, is everything on the table when you show up, or in your mind do you have, well, I'm really only going to do this or this?
Well, everything is on the table, and you mentioned rolling with the punches and technology and stuff. I came in at a deficit, meaning that I, like you said earlier, I was on the last caboose of the train for sessions. So the Linn drum was already out. The Linn drum came in mid to late 80s. Linn drum 2,
the
MPC
R8,
60. Yeah, just the drum machines were just, once they came in, they were there. And I knew that it was either friend or foe. And I was like, you know what? Screw this. I'm going to learn how to program them. I'm going to learn how to sample my own sounds. I'm going to learn how to use a sequencer. So had I not done that, I would have been stuck I don't know, playing in a garage again, like 8th grade,
Yeah.
And it's like I knew as a session drummer and a touring drummer, I had to get on top of the technology before it got on top of me,
So as I look through your discography and all the amazing artists you've worked with through all different spectrums, I wonder, so when you get to a session, obviously part of the session player gig is the relationships you have with producers and engineers, and that's how a lot of your work happens. Are there producers or artists that just absolutely will not tolerate technology, for lack of a better term, that are like, listen, we want a drummer to play drums and that's it, forget about it?
Yeah, because there's this whole romanticized thing of, oh man, if you get an old Gretsch kit or an old Ludwig, you're going to get that sound, and we're going to get these old cool mics. And the one thing that I could say is that's cool. Don't get me wrong. But we're dealing with old crap. That stuff breaks down, and there's wear and tear. And unfortunately, we're running out of people that know how to repair those old mics, those old mic pre's, the old drum kits. My dear friend Chris Hewer, he's the only one I know that knows how to refurb old drum kits back to and restore them back to their original factory way of how they were set up back in the 40s or the 30s or the 50s. So you're dealing with that, and I understand that sound. I understand that romanticized thing, but look, you have Toontrack, and you have singer-songwriter kit, you're covered. And again, I just have to toot that horn because that's what I've been using. And I was a collector. I had the old Ludwig, I had the old Gretsch, I had the old Rogers, I had the old Vox. I've had them all, and it's just because of the industry that's changed. There's no longer budgets for cartage for my guy to bring my drum kit over and tote it to Santa Monica and back. And
well, that's a great point. First of all, thank you for that compliment. That's the only Toontrack talk we'll allow at this point in time. We're not allowed to talk about Toontrack anymore. But I have to ask, because in your career, you have to have owned more drum sets than you can possibly even remember. And if you were going to guess at the apex of your career, how many drum instruments would you say, let's just say kits, not even instruments, how many kits would you say it was the most you owned at one point in time in your career?
I'm embarrassed to say, but not, because at the time you needed it.
No embarrassment here.
18 drum kits, 55 snare drums.
Oh, now, as
2 arms, 2 legs, 2 feet, 2 hands.
But as a lover of gear, even though I'm sure with what you were doing, like you said, you had to have specialized equipment. You never knew when you were going to need a certain sound. Did you go through seller's remorse when you moved through those kits, or was it much more clinical for someone that was just playing all the time? Do you ever look back and go, man, I wish I wouldn't have sold that one I wish I still had?
Even though I never used it, because I have a rule. I forgot where I heard it, but the rule is if you haven't used it in 5 years, get rid of it.
You get rid of it.
Yeah. And so I was looking at all these kits that I haven't used in over 5 years. I'm like, I got to get rid of it. And then, of course, like 2 weeks later, I'm like, oh man, I could have used that kit for this session. And yeah, of course there's seller's remorse. Of course there's that, because there's sentimental value in it. But then again, my thing is like, it's just stuff.
Yeah.
You can always get it back. You can always buy it back. Yeah, you pay more dearly. Yeah, you pay dearly for it, but you could always get it again. You know what I mean?
Had you ever walked into a session with one of your colleagues, a fellow drummer, or witnessed a session, heard a record after the fact and thought, whatever he's playing, I've got to find out what that was and buy it? Have you ever had a moment like that, where whatever that drum is or that sound is, I need that?
Oh, here's a scenario. I'm in a Guitar Center, and in walks Charlie Drayton and Steve Jordan. I think they were on tour with the Expensive Winos with Keith Richards. Charlie walks up to me and goes, "You need this snare drum." And he hands me a 6.5 by 14 Ludwig Galaxy snare drum.
Okay.
I'm like, all right, if you say I need it, I'm buying it. Bought it right there on the spot. I didn't even play it. And I bought it because he said I needed it. I just told him that story.
You argue with him. I'll take it.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm not going to argue with Charlie Drayton.
So now we fast forward to 2024, and I'm sure you had moments of doubt, but I mean, you're still working and gainfully employed as a session drummer and musician, doing things you probably 20 years ago thought you'd never do. What's that? Do you like the new workflow? I know you do a lot of remote recording. I know you do a lot of things where you're kind of working from the comfort of your studio or your setup. Do you like that, or are you remorseful for the past? Do you pine for the way it used to be?
Sometimes, but as time goes on, as time marches on, things change, and there's no longer the budget for cartage for my drums. There's no longer the budget for, hey, we're going to spend 1 week just you getting tom sounds. Oof. Those days are over. And I used to get paid to do that all the time. Okay, we're going to spend Monday through Thursday just going through all your snares. Okay. And I would get paid a proper amount of money daily to just play snare drums all day long. And there's just no longer that budget. And a lot of things that need to be recorded these days need to be done like yesterday. We need it now. We need it yesterday. How soon can you turn it around? So now in 2024, to be able to record at home, it's just a godsend, because I can turn it around, and had spent all those years showing up early to the session, asking the greatest audio engineers of the world, hey, how do you mic a kick drum? What do you use for overheads? It paid off.
It's funny though too, because as I look through your discography, and I'm just reminded of everything you've played on, in one side of your discography, let's just talk about like soundtrack stuff. You're like the answer to a trivia question. The 6 Degrees from Kevin Bacon. Through you, I can get from The Bourne Identity to Despicable Me to Man of Steel, and that's an insane jump. But that does bring up probably one of the most famous recent drum experiences that the drum community got to witness, was the Hans Zimmer Man of Steel, the ultimate drum session, which you were a part of. And can you just talk about that for a little? I mean, I'm sure you're sick of talking about it, but as a player and as drummers, a lot of whom I'm sure are watching and listening, I mean, that seems like more than lightning in a bottle. The opportunity for all of those drummers to be in one place at the same time, all playing together, seems like some mad scientist's dream come true.
Well, as we all know and love, Hans Zimmer is a mad scientist. And it was his idea to go, you know what, let's get 12 drummers in a room, and we're just going to make this as powerful as possible with 12 drummers.
And not just any 12 drummers, though, not just like dudes. Like, let's get the 12 greatest drummers currently in the business, which is what blew my mind.
Yeah, it was heavy. It was just like, okay, you could walk in there and be totally intimidated, or you could walk in and go, wow, I was called to be a part of this, and acknowledge it, accept it, and be thankful, which I was. I was like, okay, I guess I'm worthy to be here, and I'm going to accept that. Because I could have easily just gone in the corner, thrown up, put the keys in the ignition and go home. Like,
sorry.
There were heavies there, but I was like, you know what? Okay, I'm supposed to be here, and I accept it. And, I thank my dear friend, Satnam Ramgotra, for being the contractor on that and getting that all together and getting all those wonderful drummers together. And it was incredible, and just look over to your left and there's Jim Keltner, and look to your right and there's Sheila E., and look across the way and there's Vinnie Caliuta. It's like, wow, is this a dream?
Well, and to that avail, I mean, that movie was released in a time when that could have very easily been done with software or drum machines or anything else.
Easy.
And he chose not to. And I think the result, as you said, it speaks for themselves. There's an organic energy and feel. And again, it still blows my mind that it had never been attempted before, because it doesn't seem like so far-fetched of an idea to bring all these players in to do something. But there's just something about I think as someone that was a part of it, obviously you have a different perspective. I think for those of us that watched, it was very, very in sync with the idea of Superman itself. Here's this otherworldly, other real thing that's going to save us all. And you see that finally all these amazing players that we've been reading about and watching and following their careers and buying the records they play on, they're all in one spot, kind of like it's like a big Voltron Superman itself. And then here's this crazy world-renowned composer that we all love and can't wait to see what he does next. And
Right.
You know, at the time, Hans Zimmer was pretty famous for having this super elaborate computer system that he had designed to house all of his orchestral samples. I mean, so this guy's no stranger to that world. And he could have, like I said, he could have phoned it in and just like, ah, well, just program it, you know, do some stuff, maybe some overdubs. But man, and the video, you know, again, was for a movie, so the video made sense. But it's just to be able to see it and try and imagine that electricity. I'm happy for you, very happy for that you are a part of that, because I would think that's a career highlight as well. I mean, people you've known and worked with and seen and admired and heroes and peers. And I mean, it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, it doesn't. And to be a part of that, like you said, it's just like, it's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And there's a picture of all of us that's hanging up in my wall upstairs, you know, and we're all behind our drum kits. And it's a reminder daily for me when I walk by to get up and go brush my teeth. It's like, man, you know, okay, nice. I may not be working today.
Right.
But that day, not only did I work, but I worked hard and I worked with my heroes. And that was just one of those things, like, you know, like it'll be carved on the headstone, you know. Had worked with Hans Zimmer and 12 amazing drummers.
When you talk about your career to people or you're interviewed, are there any records or artists that come up more frequently than others in the conversation from their standpoint?
Well, yeah, it's always Mick Jagger, you know. I think that had a big impact. Elton John, Tom Petty. Those are usually the three that I get all the time.
I would have thought you would have gotten asked about Celine Dion, and I would have thought you would have gotten asked about Johnny Cash as well. I did nail those three. Those were the three I specifically, I'm like, I'm not going to ask any question. We've answered those ad infinitum. But the Celine Dion record that you've got some credits on, that's, you know, that's the record. It's all coming back, and the Jim Steinman song, and the big, again, the height of the music industry, the whole before the Titanic and everything.
Right.
And then I find that just the kind of, again, like you said, you came from this very unique, specific genre, playing live and doing all these things. And then you just sort of, you burst into all the genres, like you were everywhere, you're playing on everything. And then the Johnny Cash record, again, that's one of those, holy cow, superstar artist, superstar producer. It's like, wow, that's got to be another phenomenal moment, I would think too.
Yeah. You know, what's really cool about it is, it was in 1996 working with Johnny, and my wife and I were getting married that year. And I don't know how he found out, but he called, man. He called and left a message on our voice machine and said, "Curt, Daniela, congratulations. I understand you guys are getting married." And
it's a pretty good Johnny Cash, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, and I'm so pissed because it was done on one of those Panasonic phone answering machines with the cassette tape. And I saved the tape because it's like, oh my God, I got to save this. This is Johnny Cash leaving us a congratulatory message, right? Can't find the tape. I don't know where it is. And I tore the house apart. I don't know where it is.
But you were there. It's all right.
I was there.
Nothing to prove. It's just for the two of you. And that's the year I got married too. That's a good year to get married.
Oh, cool. Nice. Congrats.
Well, as well to you, my friend. Your wife's also a musician though, correct? She plays?
Yes, she's a jazz vocalist and composer.
Ooh. Now, because she's in the business, does she just humble you constantly and not care about you or anyone you've worked with? Or just, does she keep you in check? Or do you get to play and work on her stuff as well? Does she call other session drummers? She's like, honey, I have a drummer coming over. If you could get out of the studio for a while.
That's happened. but I have to preface it with this. She's a New York Sicilian. You know what I'm talking about over here.
I do.
So there's that to deal with,
right?
which is fantastic.
That's the right choice of words. That to deal with. Yes.
I love it. But it was one of those things where I knew if I was going to get involved in a relationship, a marriage, more specifically, that it would have to be someone that understood what I did.
Sure.
And what I do is just random. It's like nothing, collect unemployment, sitting on my butt, picking my nose. Hey, you want to go on tour? It's 7 months. Okay. The 9 to 5 husband or wife or partner, that would flip them out.
It's true.
And I know and I know a few musicians that have married a 9 to 5 partner, and it flipped them out.
Mm.
You're going to be gone for 9 months?
Sure. Yeah.
You know, and to us musicians, that's just a portion of time that will be, you know, embossed in the bronze statue of whoever we're playing with, you know.
Of course.
And it just takes a special human being to understand what we do. And I knew I had to have that in my life. And my wife Daniela as well needed that as well. So it's a complementary relationship where I could support her and she supports me, and we're honest, you know.
That's awesome. Well,
it's
that's
like,
why.
yeah, you suck. You played that crash cymbal. Don't dig it. Cut it out. It's like, okay. And I know that she's being honest rather than, hey man, you're doing great. You know, she's not giving me the wink and the gun. You know, she's telling me the truth.
So I just out of curiosity and for everyone listening, I think the session scene gets talked about so often. And in these days, that conversation is dominated by Nashville, obviously, because there's a lot of music made in Nashville. And one of the things that comes up with session players in Nashville is there's a lot of talk about the union, because a lot of guys are union guys in Nashville. Is it the same in LA? Are you a union guy? Is the union a big deal as it is in Nashville?
Yeah, yes, I am a union guy, Local 47, proud to be so. And of course, you know, we work on stuff that's, you know, that is, you know, like I call them vanity projects. You know, we do that. But I always insist that, okay, if this vanity project decides to get signed and it gets on a label and it gets sold, please run a session or two through the union so you could pay into my health and welfare and my pension.
Sure.
Because this whole bro deal thing, you know, I get bummed out when I hear that. Hey, bro, can you do me a bro deal and play on my songs all day long for $50? No. First of all, I don't know you. You're not my bro. Right. Like if you called me, Rick, and said, bro, can you hook me up to play on 3 songs? I'd be like, yeah, just send me a slice of Illuminati's and we're good. I would be totally good, you know, because you are my bro. But if it's someone I don't know and they ask for that, no, you know.
Now, that's a great point, though. Do you find that the modern, and I'm like the old man yelling at the clouds, right? But do you find that younger people or the modern music making audience assumes that relationship with you when they reach out to you, or when younger people sort of get involved in trying to hire or work with you? Do you find that the social component is different? They expect more, or it's a little less professional or cordial, or, for lack of a better term, respectful than maybe it was?
I think it's all of that. I think it has to do with not knowing the backstory, you know?
Sure.
Like, I'll get called from a new up and coming artist and they just know that the producer picked me because I'm a good drummer and I'll be able to come and play on their music and make it sound and feel great.
Right.
And so I'll be in the studio with them, you know, 3 or 4 days, and they'll be like, they'll come in on the 5th day and go, oh my God, you played with one of my favorite artists, Lana Del Rey. You recorded on her record. And I'm like, yeah, I did. And then they go, well, who else have you played with? And so I go down the list and it's always like, oh my God, my grandparents love the Stones. And then I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, get out. I'm firing myself now.
Wait a minute. I'm old. No, but you know, it's cool though, because it's like, for them, it's discovery. And for me, it's like, oh my God, I get to turn you on to stuff that I played on that you might dig or completely hate.
Yeah.
So it's a two-way street.
If you could go back and you could choose, nothing changes for you. It's like there's no consequence financially, family, anything, to do mostly records or mostly soundtracks, both records, but you know, just play straight pop music or play soundtracks. Is there one that you like more than the other, or do you like them both the same?
God, they both have different energies. Like, for example, playing on a movie date, you're sitting in front of 50 orchestral players, string players, brass. You know, so you got to get it right in one take. And usually those charts are minimum 6 to 8 pages long. So the reading, you got to get your reading up. You got to sit there, play it once perfectly, and move on. And that is always like
pressure. Like,
let's just say a certain part of my body gets really tight. It gets really tight. I get really nervous.
Yes.
But somehow I pull it off. Records are a little more casual. Depending on the artist, sometimes they really are focused on what they want. And so you have to really dial in with them to get there. And some are just like really loose. Hey man, I called you, do your thing. And then it becomes fun.
So that's another great point. Your feel. You're known for your feel. And like all great session players, you have your own feel. Is that accidental, natural, or something you worked on? Or a combination of the three?
Well, I think it's natural. When my mom was 8 months pregnant with me, she was in her jazz trio playing B3 and piano. So like I've said on many interviews, I hear B3 and it's like instant thumb in the mouth and run toward the, hobble over toward the B3. But you think I have a good time, man. My mom just grooved her ass off. She was insane. So I get a lot of my groove from my mom, God bless her. And, but yeah, it was something I never needed to work on in terms of groove. I went to Musicians Institute, PIT, and I went there specifically to learn how to read. So I knew all the styles, but I was like, what does it look like? How do I read it? How do I interpret it? How do I write it?
Would you encourage young drummers to do that today? To
absolutely.
To pull that component together? A lot of people are split, right? So a lot of people are like, it's all about feel, and I get that, and that's fine. And a lot of people will make the argument if you're playing in a specific genre that doesn't really require a lot of technical. I mean, but from your advantage point, your experience, you're looking at this as if you can learn to read, learn to read.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like a language. My wife's Italian, so I'm learning Italian right now through her and all my friends that are Italian. They're just I'm trying to get that vocabulary together, and it's just like drumming. There's that one time, and I'll say this to you field players, you guys that don't read, because I was one of those guys. There will be that one time where you're going to get called and they're going to be like, okay, come on, here's what it pays. Everything's going to be groovy. And you're going to sit behind the kit and you're going to look over to your left on the music stand and there's going to be a chart. And then that certain body part. Yeah, and it gets real. And that certain body part's going to get really tight.
We get into the clinching.
You get into the clinching and you're going to get really nervous and they're going to have to call someone else. And you're going to lose out on that gig. All because you refuse not to learn what a quarter note, an eighth note, or a 16th note is. And it'll cost you. And I mean that dearly, not only in monetary, but it'll cost you future calls.
Well, and that's a good point you bring up. So how is it still, I guess, that where ultimately the gig is yours to lose, clearly, but do you feel, as you look back on your career, are there any opportunities you wish you'd have pursued differently, or where you're like, I'm probably never going to get that call again? Or have you ever walked out of a session with your head hung low inside, like, wow, maybe that didn't go the way I thought? Because I think people look at session players and you talk about all the amazing things you've done, but like Jordan, you have to have missed at least 9,000 shots to get to where you're at. So there has to be something where you can share with us you're human. Otherwise, this is going to get weird.
Absolutely. Well, one tour I could talk about, which is really interesting. I got called to audition for Cher. I walked into the room and they said, thank you. And I was like, well, I didn't even get to play. Only to find out that they were looking for 6-foot blonde-haired drummers.
That's not you?
I'm 5'6".
He's wrong for the gig, baby.
Plump and black hair. It's like, you could have told me that over the phone and not have to waste my gas and my energy driving into Hollywood to do this,
Wow. Man.
And then the great Jeff McCarl, as he tutored me into the session scene, he said, man, never be ashamed or embarrassed if you don't know something. If you're the wrong cat, let them know you're the wrong cat and have someone on standby that you can call. And there's been a few instances where I felt I was the wrong person because I couldn't do it. and Vinny was on the session. So was 3 drummers. This was for a movie called The Bourne Identity.
Yeah. There's
the chase scene in the tunnel. Yeah. So it was the 3 of us doing the 3 drummer thing. And this is pre Hans Zimmer, pre Superman. And there was a section in the chart that I just could not read. I couldn't play. So I go to the composer. I'm like, look, man, I'm the wrong guy for this. Can I go home, please? And Vinny could play my part. And he goes, no, 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 no. If you say it's not grooving or you can't do it, let's make it so you can. And it was so kind of him to kind of massage the composition for me. And I remember driving home going, God, I suck. If I could only be like Vinny. But then I remembered what Jeff told me, saying, you know, just be you. And if you're the wrong guy, let him know. But here's a situation where both the composer and I were able to meet in the middle, and it worked out, you know.
Which is pretty awesome and rare, yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, very awesome and very rare. But, you know, there's only one you, and you could only do what you know how to do. You know, we can't be everybody. And I think we all go into being a professional drummer. I can do it all. You can't, man. You may be able to play all the styles. You may be able to play at fast tempos, slow tempos, medium tempos, do all that, you know, do the wink and the gun and be the guy to have around and fun and all that stuff. But sometimes you're just not the guy for that. They call who they want. And I totally respect that. You know, there's been a few sessions where I wasn't called back because my personality was just too bright and fun and, hey, let's play. We're in the studio, you know, and they needed someone a little more sultry and more downtrodden and serious. And that's cool. And that's what they got out of the guy. And it sounds that way. And that's awesome, you know? And that's just what's required, you know?
So with all of that playing, right? So at this particular point in time, there probably isn't a studio on the West Coast you haven't been in. What would you say if you had, you don't have to, but if you had to pick your favorite studio to record drums in, for whatever reason it may be, the sound, whatever, what do you think, given everywhere you've worked, would be your favorite studio to record drums in?
I got to say capital A.
Oof,
just to
rest in
walk,
peace.
Yeah, just to walk down those halls and to see pictures of Dean Martin, Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., just the greats. Nat King Cole.
The whole thing's iconic from the minute you walk in. To your point,
the minute you walk in, it's just iconic. The Stack of Record building, you know, which is a landmark, and it's, you know, in the heart of Hollywood. You know, it's like everything I've ever dreamed of as a kid. Yeah, one day I'm going to go into that building. I had no idea there was a recording studio there when I was a kid until I moved to LA. And I would have to say capital A. Back when Al Schmidt was alive, recording with him and A was just like, okay, this is the pinnacle of,
that's it.
You know, modern.
You've made it, kid. You've made it.
Totally.
And just made it.
And just sitting there with Al, and it was great.
But Capitol, unfortunately, has decided to close the studio. So if you were going to, based on just what's available to you now, if you were going to go to a studio in LA and say, I can walk in and I know this room, I can get the drums. Let's say you were doing your own project, you're going to record your drums in a studio. Where would you go for your music, something you wanted to do? And you'd set up a kit and you'd know exactly, you could predict what it was going to sound like when you were done because you've worked there so much.
Well, first and foremost, I'd say the foyer of my home, right in front of the front door where I set up my
but that's the best, right? And you don't have to go far for that. No traffic.
Yeah, and I could record in my bathroom. How cool is that? So
depends on where the video camera's at, Curt.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, no foot cams, please.
No, it's not happening.
So I would say my home first, and then probably second. I just worked there the other day, Village D.
Okay.
Where Fleetwood Mac recorded Rumors, you know, and it's like,
thank God they're still open. I mean, it's all these studios that are still doing it are just like you. They're warriors. They're fighting through it. They're looking for ways to adapt and make their services accessible. And I mean, one of the things I know is you do a lot of remote sessions now. I mean, you talk about recording from your foyer. Do you like having the responsibility of getting it all together? I mean, not just showing up and playing, but now you're the engineer, now you're the producer, now you're everything. Do you enjoy that?
At first I really hated it because I came up during the era of there was an engineer, a second, they set up the mics, they got the sounds, and I would just sit behind the kit, play, eat lunch, go home. That was the thing, So I was spoiled by the 90s session scene. And then when home recording came through, I had to learn how to operate mic pre's and microphones and where they go and where am I going to set it up and where are the standing waves of where the microphones are going to go and that whole thing. But then I got really into it, and I'm kind of a techie in the sense that I could get around on a computer and know my way around it and record and do other stuff, So I got into it, and it's like I don't mind it now. I don't mind recording and sending the stems off and putting it in a Dropbox and someone downloading it. I don't mind that one bit. As a matter of fact, I almost prefer it because I know what I'm giving them. Sure. And if they're looking for something different, I could provide that. They could say, well, can you swap out the snare drum? Those hi-hats are too crispy. Can you do this? Can you do that? And it's like, oh, okay. And I don't have to ask somebody. I could do it on my own time. I could say, okay, I'll do that, but I got the barbecue going. Let me go turn the chicken.
Sure.
I'll do it in an hour. And they'll be like, yeah, great. Okay.
Well, and one of the other things people that follow your career notice is you've been fairly consistent and loyal to the brands and the companies you work with gear-wise, which is obviously a huge part of your success. You were an early adopter. I mean, I know it's hard to for many people, young people especially, to look at now, but there was a time when there was no Drum Workshop drums and it was just hardware. And then in the early 90s, when they put the drum company together, you were one of the first people out there playing DW drums and getting into that whole thing. And you're still with DW to this day. You're still with Peisty to this day. You still do. I mean, there's a loyalty to that I think is beautiful that not necessarily everyone else in your field adopts. Do you find, for your vantage point, that it's the gear or the company, or is it a combination of both that keeps you loyal?
It's a combination of both. And what I always tell young drummers that ask me, how do I get an endorsement? How do I get free stuff? Yes. It's not about free stuff, and it's not about an endorsement. You got to play what you love. And if it means paying for it, pay for it. And if you love it so much, you could hit up the company rep and say, look, man, I love your cymbals. How can I get involved? How can I become part of the family? How can I help you? And how can you help me? And it's a relationship.
Yeah.
And again, it all is based on what you love. And from there, that's how the relationship grows. And that's how you become part of the family. That's how you develop your sound. There's a lot of drummers, God, through the decades that have hip hopped around to different companies. And it's like,
sure,
dude, now you look like, like you don't care.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's just a bad look, and then what defines your sound at that point? I know your
weird
feel
for you though, as a session player, if you're asked to play on gear, like, the producer's got a Gretsch kit. Now, Gretsch may be the bad example because Gretsch kind of supersedes a lot of things, but you get to a session and they've already got a kit they want you to play. Is that a weird experience for you? Or are you pretty flexible?
It was at first, but then I'm flexible because, I'm willing and able to see the vision of the producer. Sure. If that's what they want and need, that's what they want and need. So it's, for example, they got a Craftsman drill and a chainsaw. That's what they're going to use as a tool. They called me as the operator.
Yeah.
I get it.
Okay.
That's what I'll do.
That's a good way to look at it. Actually, that's pretty
well, I always try to break it down in those layman's terms because some people are just so hell bent on, if I don't play this, that means that. And it's like, no, drums are tools. The sticks, the cymbals, the drums, the heads, the pedals, the hi-hat pedal, the hardware. They're all tools, and you need the right tools for the job.
Yeah. So, okay, now we've talked ad infinitum about your career, and so many of the we've barely gleaned the surface to anybody out there. Just, you know, it's my least favorite phrase, but Google it. Just go Google it, look at it, and then you're welcome. So, but given all the people you've played with, give me 2 people that you haven't played with that you wish in a perfect world, whether it's 15-year-old Curt, whether it's now 2 people you wish you could or could have played with.
Oh man,
I know it's hard for you, which is aggravating for us.
I know. You know, that's a hard one because there's so many new artists that I'd love to play with, and
sure,
then there's artists that are no longer with us that I'd love to. So
sure,
you know, I mean,
those are that's the game, and the rules are unflinching. I am Alex Trebek, unflinching with this
okay.
game. You got to pick 2.
One song with Jimi Hendrix, one song with Van Halen. We're done.
Wow.
Done.
Oof. Yeah, that'd be oof. Wow.
You know, I totally. I got to admit, I fanboyed over Wolfie Van Halen. I was the house drummer for the this year's Music Cares. I was in the house band, and Mammoth played. And Whitlock, the drummer, he's a friend of mine. We finally got to meet in person. And I'm like, oh man, I'd love to meet Wolfie. He's like, oh man, I'll totally introduce you. And my palms are sweating, and it's like, oh my God, Wolfie Van Halen, the son of the king.
Did you call him Mr. Van Halen? Mr. Van Halen.
No, but he shook a really sweaty hand.
Yeah,
you know. But nice. I you know, I always told myself, if I stop sweating and if I stop getting nervous, that's when it's time to quit.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great crit. It's like if you stop being a fan, what are we doing it for? Because we should. I know. Gone to law school or construction school. Is that a thing?
Exactly.
Construction school? I don't know.
Yeah. So I fanboyed out on
man. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
So, okay. Right now, as we drift to the inevitable end of our conversation, I want to point out that you are available still for session work, and you do a lot of remote session work. People can get a hold of you on your website, and they can contact you. And like you said, you have this process where you can, you know, work with their music, do whatever they're going to do, and you have a number of different things. Is there anywhere else or anything else going on in 2024 that people should be checking you out other than your website, which is eternal? It's always going to be there.
Yeah, my website, KirkeeBmusic.com, KIRKEEB music.com, all one word.
Do you want to tell people how that nickname came to be so that they don't have to ask in the comments? Or
it is, it comes from 2 sources. My Filipino grandmother that couldn't say Curt, and when she'd hold me as a baby, she'd rub my cheek and go Kirkee, 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 Kirkee. For whatever reason, she couldn't say Curt. Sidebar: my Italian in-laws can't say Curt, so they call me Curt or curtains. You know, like curtains hanging from the window.
Yes, that checks out.
And then Kirkee B, you know, that came from working with Morris Day and Mickey Free from Shalimar. You know, it's just like, yo, Kirkee B, you know, break it down. You know,
so wait a minute, you had to play Jungle Love and Dancing in the Sheets in your career. You had to do both. You've played both songs live.
Yes, I have.
Have you ever
proudly?
Have Jesse and Jerome ever come behind the drum set with the mirror and let you check yourself out, or no? Is that
no? I'm much too non-handsome for a mirror. That's for Morris only.
Wow.
Which, by the way, side note, everyone gets it twisted, but that's Morris Day playing drums on all that early Prince stuff at the time.
I heard that rumor, right? That he is actually a very accomplished drummer, and he's got it together.
He's in my top 5. He's so greasy and funky. To this day, he's, you know, he'll play drums in his show. So if you ever get a chance to go see Morris Day in the Time Live, he'll get back there behind those drums and slap away. And he's just so
with the level of talent that he surrounded himself with, obviously, not only just yourself, but from Jelly Bean Johnson to the Flight Time guys to, I mean, the people that have come and gone through the time under his tutelage. I think it speaks. It's not, I don't think it's surprising he's a genius, a musical genius, but it's crazy. But Shalimar, you danced in the sheets, man. I'm just saying, you played Dancing in the Sheets. You were there. You're one of few people that were there.
I was that guy.
Okay. So is there anything else you got going on this year? Any big news you can share with us? Anything you can't share with us that you should anyway?
Well, let's see. Something I'm always involved with, which is a company called Westco Pedals.
Okay.
I was a co-brainchild of a pedal called the Grease Juicer, and it's a envelope filter pedal with fuzz. And it's with my dear friend Bob Daspit, who is the proprietor of the company Westco Pedals. Go to westcopedals.com.
Westcopedals.com.
Yeah. And yeah, it was just, it was like my whole point behind it was, who needs another snare drum or a signature stick or a pedal? It's like, what's the one thing that a musician will buy before, going to their grandmother's funeral? Guitar pedals.
Of course. Yeah.
and I mean that in the most lighthearted way, of course.
Yeah.
But
it's an addiction is what he's getting at.
Those things are addicting. Yeah. They are addicting. And
so Westco Pedals, which is great.
Westco Pedals, yeah. WESTCO Pedals, all one word, westcopedals.com. So I'm involved with that and relaunching that at some point down the road. I'm continuing to still do lessons and consulting, which you can reach me either on my website, Kirkee B Music, or directly on email, kirkeebdrum@gmail.com.
Which is awesome.
KRKB, Kirkee B Drum, DRUM.
Let me ask you one question for all the future potential session clients. Is there any style of music you'll walk away from where you feel like maybe it's not a good fit?
If it's intense odd meter where it requires like crazy soloing and odd meter, I will put you on the phone directly with Vinny Caliuta or Matt Gartzka or some amazing drummer and just say, here you go. Talk to this guy. He could sort you out. I'm more your meat and potatoes, groove, make it feel good, sexy dance floor guy. I'm your guy.
I love it. That'd be the best business card in the history of business cards, is just your name with all of those descriptors under it, especially last being dance floor guy. I love it already. So,
wow. Speaking of which,
yes,
our dentist said that kids no longer dance together anymore, boy and girl. He's got some teenage boys, and they go to the dance now at the school, and they dance by themselves, which is so odd.
That's a strange.
That's strange, right?
Look, this is going to be another 3 hours on this podcast.
I know.
Of me standing in my front yawn, just screaming at the clouds and saying, remember when life was good?
I know. Old man, get off my lawn.
Kids are supposed to dance like Kevin Bacon. What's wrong with you?
I know. I know. I had to bring that up because I said dance floor guy. And it's like, God, is anyone even on the dance floor anymore?
I just picture one very, very sad young person just kind of like shoegazing to whatever's on. And then
emo.
And then Taylor Swift comes on and somehow it unites everyone. That's in my mind. That's how that works. All right. So what we're going to do at this particular point in time is let you get back to your life and your day, because again, we could talk to you for 97 hours and I know people would listen.
And I would talk.
We're grateful for you. And man, I can't say enough. My friend. Just thank you for taking the time out to hang with us. Again, all of the website information will be linked below. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Curt Bisquera. You've been listening to the Sound Horizons podcast, brought to you by Toontrack. And we can't wait to talk to you on the next one with someone else. Probably not as amazing as Curt. I'm not going to lie. It's probably, I might just do that one myself. Might just be boring. I might just share family photos. Might just be that bad. But no, Curt, thank you for your time. And we look forward to all you have to show us. We'll talk to you soon,
Rick.
buddy.
Thank you. Thank you so much.